anyways, this initial paragraph opens up the world of constructivism to you. Now, the constructivists are interesting people because, you know, you often hear people ask, is it genetic or environmental? Which is, it's not a good question because it's a false dichotomy. The genes formulate structures in accordance with environmental demand right from the beginning of the organism's emergence. And so there's a constant interplay between the environment and genetics. But the environment isn't also just a thing that's out there that's like made out of lions and tigers and moose and buildings and, you know, the sky. It's an information field. And the constructivists point out rightly that partly what you're doing when you're operating in the world is interacting with this field of information and incorporating its structure into the structure of your mind and body, which is how you adapt. So you could say in some sense that you're built out of information and matter. That's a good way of thinking about it. And the constructivists are very interested in how you go about acquiring information and how you then transform that information into the sort of knowledge that you can apply to the world. So they're also very pragmatic, especially Piaget, because Piaget regards knowledge as like the prerequisite for adaptive action. So again, he's less concerned about the facts that you know about the structure of the world than he is about how it is that you modify and adapt your behavior so that you can survive in the world. So that's the first postulate, that's constructivism. And then the next postulate is that there are revolutions in the internal structures that you construct that emerge as a consequence of you acquiring new information. Sometimes that information can already be fit into a knowledge structure that you possess, but sometimes the information is so anomalous or novel that it blows out fundamental presuppositions that you've already established and forces you to not only add some information to your repertoire of information, but to reconfigure the structure you use to represent the information. You don't like that. People don't like it when that happens. It's too dramatic and upsetting. So, which is often why revolutions in science or in any other field are first resisted. I mean, it's very complicated. The reasons people are opposed to new ideas are very complicated. And there's lots of theories about why that occurs precisely. But I'll briefly outline a good theory. There's a bunch of them, but I'll outline one. So, let's say there's already a scientific theory, and it's instantiated in the world, so people accept it. And let's say that you are a proponent of that theory. So you might say, well, that theory therefore governs your worldview, and if I threaten it, then your worldview is going to fall apart, and that's going to make you fall apart. And that's not a bad theory. But here's a variant of that which is similar, but which I think is better. So I'm a professor. Let's say I have a theory. Now what I'm doing with my theory is buying my right to be a professor. So I would come to the University of Toronto as a job candidate, and I would say, here's my theory, and here's why I think the facts support it, here's what it's good for. And they'll say, okay, it looks like you know enough about what you're doing so that you can occupy this position in this dominance hierarchy. Okay, and I'm pretty happy about that, because that position in that dominance hierarchy is pretty permanent. That's one of the advantages to an academic job. It's like, once you have it, as long as you're relatively confident and relatively ethical, then you can maintain it across time. So it's a big deal to be granted that slot. And then being in that dominance hierarchy is not only a matter of what you believe, obviously. The fact that I'm in that dominance hierarchy means I get a certain salary, and that's not hypothetical. That allows me to eat, so I'm happy about that. It's not only psychological, and I can pay my housing payments with it and so on. So it protects me from the cold and offers me something to eat, and it gives me a certain public status. And so if some other joker comes along, say they're young, and they say, well, I have a different theory and it makes your theory look stupid, then I'm not going to be very happy about that, partly because it upsets the way that I configure my understanding of the world, and that's a drag, but I might recover from that. But it also undermines my claim. It undermines the validity of my claim to that position in the hierarchy. And so it sort of makes me an imposter. Say the guy turns out to be right. It's like, poof, I'm an imposter. And I no longer really have the right to occupy that position. And someone might even point that out, although it doesn't happen very often in the case of professors. You know, it happens fairly frequently in other sorts of occupations. You know, all of a sudden your position is made useless because somebody figured out how to automate you, and poof, you're gone. And like, that's hard on your worldview, but it's a lot harder on your salary. So a lot of the reasons that people cling to the validity of their theories is because it gives them a claim to a certain kind of, what would you call, skill set and utility that then gives them a claim to occupy a certain position in the dominance hierarchy, and that protects them from all the horrors of reality. Not completely, but, I mean, I have health insurance, for example, and sometimes that's really, really helpful. So I don't want some joker coming along and pointing out that my theory isn't right. Anyway, so far that hasn't happened. So that's a good thing as far as I'm concerned.